What is Surrealism? In order to understand Surrealism in cinema, we must first understand what Surrealism is. Surrealism is an art movement that developed in Europe after World War I. The term was coined by André Breton. André Breton was a French writer and poet born in 1896 in a small town in Normandy, France. He studied medicine and psychiatry, which led him to working in the neurological wards in Nantes during World War I. He is considered one of the founders of Surrealism. He details the origins and specifications of Surrealism in his three manifestos of Surrealism written in 1924. Breton states in page 5 of his first manifesto that Surrealism is the psychic automatism in its pure state, by which one proposes to express verbally, by means of written word, or in any other manner, the actual functioning of thought, dictated by the thought in the absence of any controlled exercise by reason, exempt from any aesthetic or moral concern. He says that thought in the absence of any control exercised by reason, exempt from any aesthetic or moral concern. Surrealism is based on the belief in the superior reality of certain forms of previously neglected associations, in the omnipotence of dream, in the disinterested play of thought. André Breton claims that Surrealism is derived from the unconscious mind. The ideology of the unconscious mind is derived from Sigmund Freud. Breton met with Freud sometime in 1921, but he had read Freud's iceberg theory written from 1900 to 1905. This theory influenced the development of the idea of Surrealism. Breton relates Surrealism to Freud's iceberg theory by suggesting that Surrealism is derived from the unconscious mind. The iceberg theory claims that the mind has three levels of consciousness: the conscious, the preconscious, and the unconscious. The theory states that the unconscious mind contains the desires and drives that humans are unaware of. However, while we are unaware of these desires, they still influence our actions and behaviors. Some examples of these desires or driving factors are fear, violent motives, shameful needs or experiences, unacceptable desires, and dreams. Surrealism relates to this because it was created as a reaction to the horrific trauma individuals went through due to World War I, and it was somewhat influenced by avant-garde Dadaist art movement. André Breton was a part of a Dadaist group in 1916. Surrealist art. Now let's look at an example of Surrealist art and what characteristics of this art classifies it as surreal. It is important to note that artists who worked in a Surrealist mode aimed to free the unconscious mind in order to unlock the full potential of the mind's imagination. Unlocking the unconscious mind would free the imagination from rational thought, thus allowing artists to create a new kind of art free from the restrictions of what we know as reality. Surrealist art typically has imagery from dreams and uncanny or shocking elements that differ from our normal expectations of reality. The Persistence of Memory by Spanish artist Salvador Dali is one of the most famous works of Surrealist art. This masterful piece was created during the height of the Surrealism movement in 1931. Dali's method for painting this small 9.5 by 13-inch wide painting was to induce himself into a hypnotic state, unlocking his unconscious mind. Dali attested that this state allowed him to break free from reality. The creation of the Persistence of Memory was groundbreaking for the Surrealist art movement. The painting brings visual confirmation to the very ideal of surrealism by taking familiar objects like the clocks and distorting them. Clocks are familiar to the reality that we know as humans, but they are solid, hard items that physically cannot exist in space the way they are depicted in Dali's painting. This relates back to Breton's first manifesto, where he says, "There is a man cut in two by the window, but there could be no question of ambiguity, accompanied as it was by the faint visual image. The flesh-colored form in the center of the painting is a self-portrait of Dali. Upon close inspection of the form, human-like characteristics can be identified as long eyelashes and a nose. The idea of this ambiguous form being a self-portrait of Salvador Dali is strange, and certainly not the reality we know, but surrealism forces the consumer to consider that the reality they know is not the only one." Surrealism in cinema. Now that we have learned the origins of surrealism and the art and movement that followed, we can better understand what surrealism is in cinema and how cinema brings an avant-garde perspective to surrealism. Cinema provides surrealism with a non-traditional art form that has the exclusivity of editing. Editing, juxtaposition of imagery, musical elements, dialogue, etc., allows cinema to visually communicate surrealism like no other medium. Salvador Dali and Luis Buñuel co-wrote, filmed, and directed the film Un Chin Adalu. This film is the conjunction of Dali and Buñuel's dreams. Imagery in dreams is often distorted, bizarre, and just simply not the reality we are used to seeing. Pierre Revity, a French poet, consistently inferred that dreams display a distant reality, and that the juxtaposition of dreamlike imagery from distant realities creates strong imagery. He says, "The image is a pure creation of the mind. It cannot be born of a comparison, but only of the bringing together of two more or less distant realities. The more the relations of the two realities brought together are distant and fitting, the stronger the image. An image is not strong because it is brutal or fantastic, but because the association of ideas is distant." So, what is the point of surrealism in cinema? Surrealism in cinema forces the viewer to open their mind to the possibility of multiple realities and creates a conversation around introspection. Surrealism was very revolutionary for the time that the movement was first taking the world by storm. In modern times, fantasy, alternate realities, and discovering the unconscious mind is not so revolutionary. The normalization of these aspects of life has paved the way for modern directors, writers, and producers to take surrealism in cinema to extreme levels.